Hi, I'm Chris Cooper. Welcome to the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Thanks for joining us. From time to time, we like to introduce you to some of the creatures you may encounter in your landscape. So today, Andy Williams is here with an animal ambassador, the Eastern Hognose Snake, also known as the Puff Adder. And Mr. D is here with advice on dealing with moles, voles, and other critters we're seeing in our landscapes. All of that and more is coming up next on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South, so stay with us.
This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Goodwin's Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Andy Williams. Andy is Director of Lichterman Nature Center, and Mr. D is here.
Howdy, Chris.
Thanks for joining me, fellas. All right, we have a guest with us today, Andy.
We sure do, Chris. This is a female eastern hognose snake.
Cool.
It's native to the entire southern region. This particular color morph, the colorway actually is not native to the Tennessee area, but you'd find this in the coastal regions, you know, North, South Carolina, and Florida. The ones you'd find around here would be either brown or gray with dark blotches.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look closely at this, you can see it's got some tan brown banding. Can you see okay, Mike?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think you want to get too close.
And actually, I brought this because it's very interesting. It's very definitely native, and you find them all through Tennessee, including Shelby County. But this snake has such an interesting natural history. It's called a hognose snake because you can see, and you'll probably be able to see this on camera, but it has an upturned scale on its snout. Mm-hmm. And it uses that for digging, and it likes sandy soil, it likes low-growing places. The reason it tends to be away from houses, it likes swamps where it can find its favorite food, which are toads.
Toads.
It eats a lot of amphibians. It'll eat some mice or something, but it's a specialized feeder for toads. And but what I mean by that, well, have you ever had a dog that's caught a toad and it comes out and it's all frothy mouth and it's going, you know, it's kind of proud of itself, but it's, you know, it's obviously can't bark or it's in distress. Well, that's because the toads have a big gland behind their eyes that puts this alkaloid poison out that, you know, it's not fatally toxic, but makes them unpalatable.
Okay.
And it makes them unpalatable to birds and even other snakes. But apparently, hognose snakes are immune to that toxin. It doesn't have the same effect on them. In fact, I guess they find it delicious, although they, you know, who knows what they're thinking about it.
Tastes like chicken.
Yeah, exactly. Also, typically the dogs will let go of a toad it catches, but the ones that don't, you know, the toads will puff up. Well, all snakes have rear-facing teeth. That's to help hold their prey in. They come in the mouth, they have trouble getting out. But I don't have a skeleton of a hognose snake, but they have fangs in the back. They're rear fangs that puncture the toads and help deflate them when they puff up that way. In addition, there's some controversy about it, but it's obviously I'm convinced. But some people believe, but they can't prove that these are mildly venomous. Now, before we get too excited about it, obviously I would not be here today for that. But you never know about things. You know, in nature, all spiders are venomous, but not all the spider venom affects us in the same way. Okay. You know, like they're really the venom can be toxic to their preferred prey, other insects, and that sort of stuff. But here in the South, only like the brown recluse and the black widow really have a profound effect on people. People have reported from time to time the few people that have been bitten by a hognose snake. is that they have some mild skin irritation and that sort of stuff. So it's
Okay.
nothing like the hemo and neurotoxins that we're really concerned about in truly venomous snakes.
Okay. So they have bitten a couple of people, huh?
Well, yeah, but anything with a mouth can bite you.
Sure.
But they also speculate that this is also toxic to the toads, and it's not injected with the fang, but when the fangs puncture them, perhaps their saliva has the toxin in it, and it helps them subdue their prey.
Okay.
But even more interesting, and you notice my lovely placemat
Yeah,
here.
I see this.
They have some interesting defensive behavior. We've been working with this snake. It was wild caught, but I'm going to see if I can get it to puff up a bit. One of the common names for it is a puff adder, and they will puff up if we can get him to do it. See, Chrissy, maybe he'll puff at you in particular. He is not really doing it, but what they'll do is it's almost like
at it or
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
All right, like a toad.
Sometimes they're facing people, they will do that, but they puff up sort of like a cobra. They'll take in air around their head, around their neck, and it'll look like they're getting ready to strike. It'll make them look larger and more menacing.
Wow.
Yeah, my mother used to call them spreading adders.
Spreading
That's what she would
adders,
call 'em.
puff
Spreading
adders, there's a lot of names that attest to that. Finally, as a last-ditch effort, if that doesn't work, and this is too acclimated to being handled to,
Right,
to
sure.
do this, they will play dead. They'll roll over on their back, they'll stick their tongue out, and this one won't do it, but
Right,
they'll
okay.
open their mouth open. But they're sort of keep one eye on the situation, and if they see an opportunity to escape, they will make a dash for it. If they if the predator tries to roll them back over on their stomach, they will flip back over and wait for it to go.
It'd be a
go
big
away.
mistake with a lot of people.
Oh, yes,
Big
it would
mistake.
But
Yes, it would be.
But their initial
Oh,
line
man.
of defense is what I call musting, and that's the reason we have they
Yeah.
don't must from their mouth, but rather the other end, and they will expel fluids, gas, and fecal material, trying to make themselves less palatable and less attractive as a prey animal.
And we actually saw that earlier.
Yes.
First time I've seen that. Yeah. First time I've seen it.
Exactly. Most of the education animals I bring don't really have that particular issue, but this is sort of a special occasion. This is actually the second time we've actually used this animal to explain some of the native inhabitants of the Mid-South.
Okay. How about that? Yeah, I just like the way it looks.
Yeah.
So
It's a lot
pretty
more
neat.
active. You know, I brought snakes on in the past, the corn snakes and such.
Yeah.
Those are arboreal, and so they're used to being out in the open, and as long as they feel supported and in a comfortable place, this is a burrowing snake.
He's looking for a hole to get in.
Yeah, he's looking for some place to burrow and feel comfortable. That's their natural habitat. Again, they have adaptation of the special scale on their nose to dig around, but also that helps them find toads. If you're looking for toads in your garden, most of the time, unless you've got a light that's attracting moths and their prey and such, toads will be half buried in the soil or mulch.
Yeah.
Trying to stay moist, conserving energy, and just hiding and waiting for some unlucky insect to go by for them to nab.
Unlucky, right? Oh, man.
But to repeat, this is, although this
like
it's
that.
totally native, this is not one you're likely to find in your backyard unless
Okay.
you have like a wooded area in the back that attracts frogs and toads. And again, they have really different, interesting color morphs. In fact, in the pet trade, some people breed them for the various mottled shades of brown, gray, so forth
Okay.
and so on. But they're difficult snakes to keep in captivity. They will eat mice, and you can buy frozen mice on the internet and that sort of stuff. But their preferred food are toads, and unless they get toads or other amphibians, but preferably toads, they will they'll get fat, and worse, they'll get fatty livers.
Will they eat other snakes?
Yes, particularly.
they will?
Yeah,
Okay.
most snakes are fairly opportunistic feeders, but they really do prefer, amphibians and such. King snakes, seek out other snakes preferentially, and,
Right.
and some other snakes do too. And a lot depends on what part of the country they're in, and what's really available.
Very opportunistic, huh? I like that. Well, that's pretty, though.
Yeah, it also has quite a bit longer tail than a lot of
Yeah,
other
it's real-
snakes. You can
real stiff.
It's a subtle thing, but there are your general openings here, and the tail goes from my thumb all the way down to the tip of the tail there.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy, for bringing our animal ambassador today. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. D, don't you think that's pretty impressive?
Yep. So now we want to talk about controlling snakes, right?
Controlling snakes up next. Now, let's talk about the moles, voles, and these other critters we have in our landscape. And we're getting a lot of questions right now about moles with an M and voles with a V.
Right, and they're two very different critters.
Right.
The mole, of course, is burrows underground and feeds primarily on earthworms and grub worms and things like that. And pretty much the only way that I've found to be successful in controlling moles is by using a trap. And I use a scissors type trap, and last year I caught 14.
Whoa.
I've already caught one this year.
14.
I caught 14 last year in my
go.
yard. And and I live in a rural area and have a woods behind my house.
Okay.
And a pretty large yard. And you know, most people don't have that many moles.
Sure.
A mole can tunnel over 200 feet in one night, so you may only have 1 or 2 moles in your yard and have a lot of tunneling going on. In my situation, I think when I caught moles, I still had a lot of earthworms, a lot of organic matter, and so I would have other moles come in and say, there's some tunnels here. They just would move into that territory and move in.
Are they territorial?
Simply because of the availability of resources, probably. They have to cover quite a bit of ground, and so they tend to look for areas that, you know, have a lot of earthworms, and it takes quite a bit of area to support one mole. So that would mean that they would tend to be somewhat territorial.
I mean, because their diet pretty much consists of what,
Earthworms, mostly earthworms. They do eat a lot of white grubs, so they could be considered somewhat beneficial. You know, it aerates your lawn, but and the fact that they're there indicates that you have earthworms, which indicates that you have good organic matter.
Right.
But any white grub they eat is, you know, that's good for you,
That's
because
good.
white grubs can damage the roots of your grasses and ornamentals. But the way to be successful in setting a trap is to go out in an area and ideally push down all the tunnels every night for 2 or 3 nights, you know, before sundown, and then go out and make a flag or make a note of the tunnel that's raised every night and set your trap there. I don't have time to do that, so I look for a long run, a run that doesn't have lateral, you know, side, you know, tunneling off to the side. If I can find one that's 8 or 10 feet long, I'll put that indicates to me that might be a transportation tunnel instead of a feeding tunnel, and I'll put my trap there. Make sure you set the trap right so that the scissors are going across the trap, not with it, or they'll just go around it. And if you don't catch a mole within a day or two, move it to someplace else, and I've been very successful doing that. Now, voles, on the other hand, voles are you know, related to mice, and therefore any rodenticide will work for or any mouse poison will work for voles if you put that toxin in their tunnels. You can also use mice traps to catch, you know, the traps to actually catch the voles. They feed on the roots. And the bark of ornamentals, and they can actually do quite a lot of damage. Been done significant damage on some of our peach trees in the area. You know, Leewood Jones Orchard has lost quite a few peach trees because of voles.
Wow.
And really, pretty much the best thing that you can do is use rodenticides to control the voles. They will tunnel underground. They'll also have above ground trails that you can use to set use if you want to go with a trap route, or just put the rodenticides in that vicinity, because they are actually, you know, baits that attract them, and they will feed on them.
And they usually make those little small, quarter size or 50-cent piece holes.
Right.
Right next to your expensive plant material.
The
Andy. You know
hostas and
that, the
such.
hostas.
Yeah.
In fact, some people call mulch vole highways.
They like flower beds, and you know where your mulch is. You're right.
You're right, especially if you had that volcano mulch going on. I mean, they just hide in there, and then you're giving them a buffet.
It's like
so they're hiding in there, and at the same time they're girdling your tree. So
If you owls and hawks and things like that will feed on them. Snakes.
Yeah, I was going to say snakes.
So
will do that.
try not to give them a lot of cover, so that when
at
least when they get out there, they're exposed, and maybe one of the predators will take them out.
Okay.
But you can just build up pretty high numbers of voles, and they can do a lot of damage if you're not careful.
Okay. Yeah, so we shouldn't get rid of all of the snakes then. The snakes could help us out with
Snakes
that,
help with
Andy?
that. Yeah, but
Actually, very good. Snakes are, especially rat snakes and things like
Yeah.
that, really, really like voles. And so that's why I don't kill non-poisonous snakes.
Right.
as much as you
I'm
think
not
about
supposed
it.
to kill any. We need to remind folks in Tennessee, you're not supposed to kill any snakes. Snakes are a protected species.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to kill any snakes. I don't kill non-poisonous snakes. I'll go that route. If I have poisonous
Right.
snakes in the area.
Yeah, they're our friends in the garden. Sure, Andy. Right?
They are. Moles are inconvenient, but voles are insidious. I mean,
Right.
I know a lot of gardeners who go through hideous amounts of work, and like particularly with prize hostas in particular.
Yes.
What is it about hostas, do you think, that they seek out preferentially? I don't know. The roots must be delicious. But
They
must be.
must taste like chicken.
exactly.
You're right.
I don't
On our
know.
hostas, we
But to
have
protect-
to stay
yeah.
on top of it.
Even with the snakes, to protect my hostas, I bury them planted in pots. I incorporate igneous earth to make it rougher,
Yeah,
for
okay.
them to dig through in the pots. And then sometimes they still get through. I mean, it's just they're just all over the place.
Wow.
I would suggest when you use the toxicants, use the single feeding anticoagulants, so they don't have to come back and eat more than once. Because
Right.
a single feeding anticoagulant should take them out. They should get one bite of it. And,
But you have to be extra careful with that. Your pet
have
dogs and cats
dogs
can
and
get
cats,
them.
yeah.
The snake. Well, I don't know how the anticoagulants work on snakes, but I know if that birds of prey get them, it can be a really bad scene. If they catch them in a weakened state coming out. But
Yeah.
it's just a very difficult problem to get rid of, and it seems like every time you get rid of them, more come up.
More come in.
Wow.
Yep.
They are a problem. I mean, we've had them a lot out in the landscape, so that's for sure.
Job security for folks like me and you, Chris. Job security.
Job security. All right. Hey, that works for me. I have no problem with that. All right. Here's our Q&A session. Okay, you ready for this? And you just jump in there with us,
Sure.
Andy. Here's the first question. All right. Can you grow dwarf peach trees in this area? Mr. D, I see the look on your face. What do you think?
I'm not
Dwarf.
I'm not aware of any dwarfing rootstock that peach trees use. I know you can apple trees and other fruits have dwarfing rootstock, but we normally dwarf peach trees with our pruning shears. That's the way you keep a peach tree down to a manageable size. But the rootstock that I've seen with peach trees, and there's a few Lovell and Nemagard, and there are a few rootstocks, standard rootstocks that we use on peach trees. But as far as a dwarfing rootstock, are you aware of any
I'm
for
not-
peaches, plums, or
I'm not-
nectarines?
not at all.
In the literature, there's references to, particularly for container-grown dwarf peach trees, that you periodically will prune the roots. But even with that, at best, they're short-lived plants. Don't they produce maybe 6 out of 10 years or something? I don't know the exact figures, but the short-lived plant's a lot of work for a little return.
Yeah, you're right. Even in a commercial setting, up in this area, you might get 18, 20 years. The low chill varieties, 10, 12 years, and like you said, they don't fruit all of those years because of freezes and late freezes
Yeah,
and
then
things
in
like
our
that.
area, even with all that hard work, you live, one killer frost, which we have every couple of years,
Yeah.
can just knock them out.
Knock it out.
Unless your tree is small enough that you can protect it from the frost, you're just toast.
Yeah, and then you're not even talking about controlling plum curculio and
yeah,
brown
yeah,
rot and
right.
all of the spraying you got to do.
Because even though
with
they're
them. So-
dwarf, they still need to be sprayed, right?
So go with
Yeah.
something else if you want to dwarf
Yeah.
in your landscape. Go with the dwarf apples or something like that, I would suggest.
All right, go with the dwarf apples, he suggests. Okay, sounds good. Here's our next question. Do crepe myrtles have any insect or disease problems that you know about? What do you think about that one?
They have disease. They have powdery mildew.
They have powdery
That's
mildew.
a common disease on crepe myrtles, but I'm not aware of any insects that are really a problem. Are you?
Yeah, there are a couple out there now. There's the crepe myrtle aphids.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be a problem, and you can use insecticidal soap, some of your dormant oils, neem oil, or something like that. A heavy stream of water, just to knock them off will be fine. And there is now the crepe myrtle bark scale.
Bark scale.
Bark scale. So Dr. Wyndham, you know, from Nashville, and Dr. Hale were actually in town a couple of weeks ago. They got a call from someone in Germantown that actually had some of these crepe myrtle bark scales, and they think there might be a problem, and it causes the crepe myrtle to like it's been painted black.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that the scale actually, wounds the plant, and then you get sooty mildew that builds up on on the excrement that builds up.
Which is probably the same thing with the aphid. I'm
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah,
Pretty much.
Yeah, I've had that with gardenias, aphids. I mean, my first time was, of course, the whiteflies you see, and then you see the aphids, but the whitefly residue, the sooty mildew, it makes them as black as a snake. I mean,
it does.
It just completely covers them.
Just covers it. So that's the way, again, the aphid does that, and the bark scale does the same thing. So they're thinking that might be a problem here in the future. So, yeah, so those are the insects. And every once in a while, I have seen Japanese beetles, kind of congregate, around some of the flowers of the crepe myrtles. But, outside of that, I think they're fine. Southern Standard, you know that, Andy. I mean, I love crepe myrtles. They're one of my favorites.
They said they bloom for 100 days after, and they seem to.
And they seem to. They do. And for the, powdery mildews, I mean, resistant varieties.
And also the suckers. If you,
And I've got a list of fungicides here.
Oh,
okay.
that you can use for the powdery mildew.
Okay.
But before we leave the scale, though, is it an armored scale or a soft-bodied scale?
That I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to speculate.
You know what the generations, how many generations it has a year and all that? We need to check on that.
Yep. There's an article in the Commercial Appeal last Friday about Fred Morgan was reporting on that. Frequently, most people don't realize they have it until they see that the trees turn black.
Right.
Strange.
And we actually went out on site with one of the guys that worked for Fred Morgan.
Okay.
Yeah, out in Germantown. So that's when we first learned about it. So yeah, I don't know all the information yet, but we will, because Dr. Hill is working on that, so he'll let us know pretty quick.
Yeah, I've not seen it in anything like that in my crepe myrtles.
Yeah.
Yet.
But otherwise, it's one of the more bulletproof plant, but no plant is 100%. That's
Sure.
why it's important to plant a variety of different sorts of plants. So, if your whole landscaping is based on one particular plant and something knocks it out, you're just...
Yeah, you need
You're in bad
to
shape.
diversify. You need to diversify.
That's right. All right, here's our next question. This winter, I had ladybugs get inside of my home. What is the best way to get rid of them? Do I need to spray something? So what do y'all think about that one? Definitely no spray. Nah, you don't have to do that. But what do you think about that, Mr. D? Ladybugs in the house. What can we do for that?
They're beneficial, really.
Yeah.
I mean, but the problem is when they're there, they don't have anything to feed on. There's nothing out in the land. I mean, it's during the winter time, and there's nothing.
There's no aphids. They're
no
living off
aphids
their
or
body
anything to
fat.
feed on. So I would just suggest vacuuming, using a vacuum cleaner, and then be sure that you dump your vacuum cleaner after you do that. Don't just vacuum it and then put your vacuum cleaner over in the corner somewhere.
Yeah, you want to use a fresh bag, because otherwise, if you plan to relocate them, they can hibernate outside, and the temperatures slow their rate of metabolism. But if you don't use a fresh bag, you'll be just kind of dumping dumping more than ladybugs on your yard. Some people use a shop vac that they just put a towel on the bottom.
I've heard of that.
And so when they come to the shop vac, they have a soft landing, and it's pretty easy just to take the towel out and set it out in your backyard.
Because when you disturb them, they do emit an odor, and the odor's not pleasant.
Yeah. Also, they can stain. Apparently, when they get excited, their blood's yellow, and they bleed, and they can leave these yellow marks on your walls.
The blood's yellow.
Yeah.
Okay, didn't know that. All right. So, but definitely we're not going to spray anything for it.
Right.
So they're just looking to get inside, right? They're looking for somewhere warm, I guess.
Well, they're hibernating, and apparently, when the temperatures warm up outside, they get confused and they just go the wrong direction.
Yeah. Anything else, Mr. D?
And I'm just looking at the red,
I saw
the
you
red
were
book,
looking at this
and
one.
the red book, it does have a insecticide listed if you wanted to spray. But mainly, it's pest-proof seal entry points. If you can figure out where they're coming in, try to seal that with putty and things like that. And apparently, if you have an area like a sunroom or something where they congregate, if even the dead ones, if they die, you need to go on and clean that up because that attracts other multicolored Asian ladybugs.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy, Mr. D. We're out of time. Remember, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a letter or an email with your gardening questions. send your email to familyplot@wkno.org. The mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next time for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Good Winds Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.